Joining us for Soil Health for Fat Cows and Ranch Profit. It's brought to you by the Powder River Basin Resource Council. Penny Vance. I'm the Agriculture and Local Foods Organizer for the Council. We're a nonprofit Wyoming organization that's been helping Wyoming's ranchers since 1973, helping them protect their most valuable resource, their land. Today, we're all learning that degradation of soil has become a critical issue. Fortunately, there's also an explosion of interest in restoring the soil, along with growing expertise on how that's done, including our two best of the best speakers for this evening, Gabe Brown and Ann Fischer. Moderator today is John Heyneman. John's a rancher committed to good stewardship of the land who splits his time between his Sheridan residence and ranch in Montana. John will share a little bit more about himself and introduce our guest speakers. Gabe is a rancher and renowned pioneer soils expert from North Dakota, and is a rancher and NRCS conservationist from Montana. Following their presentations, we're going to have a question and answer session. We encourage you to enter your questions for Ann and Gabe in the chat box whenever they come to mind. You don't have to wait until the question and answer session. Working behind the scenes, I want you to know that we, to keep our technology running smoothly, is our communications director, Robin Bagley. And I'm now going to turn it over to our moderator. Welcome again to everybody. Enjoy the show. John, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Penny. Hello, everyone. My name is John Heyneman. And as Penny mentioned, I live in Sheridan and also work with my family in Montana. I am currently the executive director of the Plank Stewardship Initiative, which is a small nonprofit based in Sheridan. We work in southeastern Montana and northeastern Wyoming, trying to promote conservation practices and work in agriculture. And I've got that role for another 48 hours. So I'm very pleased to wear that hat for as long as I can. It's been a great pleasure working in this area with a whole host of interesting folks. And it was in that realm that I met both Ann and Gabe. And I will give a quick biography on both of them and then introduce them for their presentation. Ann Fischer is a district conservationist for the NRCS based in Baker. She ranches in North Dakota. She has been a district conservationist in Baker for 25 years. She and her husband Chip own and operate a family farm in Rom, North Dakota, where they raise a commercial herd of red Angus and 4 children. The children are mostly weaned from the last I saw. The Fischers run 250 pair of cows on 3,000 acres and have been using grazing rotations, cover crops, and bale grazing to improve soil health and thus increase productivity on their land while reducing inputs. They've moved their calving dates to the end of April to reduce winter feed costs and reduce stress on livestock during calving. 8 years ago, they sold their haying equipment in order to expand their grazing acres, and are now able to spend less time running to the equipment store for parts. Their focus on soil health has improved their operation and overall quality of life. Soil health has been a huge part of Ann's life at home and in her career for the last 15 years. Her work with soil health has resulted in a network of mentors, friends, colleagues, and practitioners who have helped guide her journey. Focusing on a system approach to farming and ranching, she has seen many operations improve their net profit and begin to regenerate their landscapes. Seeing a newfound enthusiasm for the older generations and more youth coming back to agriculture with ideas and inspiration have been the most rewarding parts of her career. And there is no one I know with a monopoly on enthusiasm like Ann Fischer. She's a pleasure to work with, and her positive outlook is contagious. In moving to Gabe in late 2014, I went to a dirt nerd conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I walked into a huge room. There must have been 750 people and they were entranced listening to a North Dakota farmer talk about soil health. And I had finished a master's degree in soil science 15 years before, and soil health was a topic, but not one that anybody could really get their arms around. And it was amazing watching Gabe Brown speak. And I knew immediately that I was going to try to get him to come to Wyoming. And about 6 months later, I did that. And I think I had the pleasure of, I was the first person to bring Gabe to Wyoming for a professional speaking event, which was we held in Casper in mid 2015 to a pretty good house, and lots of enthusiasm. It was interesting. Gabe, with his wife Shelley and son Paul, own and operate Brown's Ranch, a diversified 5,000-acre farm and ranch near Bismarck. The ranch consists of several thousand acres of native perennial rangeland, along with perennial pasture land and cropland. The ranch focuses on farming and ranching in nature's image. The Browns holistically integrate their grazing and no-till cropping systems, which include a wide variety of cash crops, multi-species cover crops, along with all natural grass-finished beef and lamb. They also raise pastured pork, laying hens, and broilers. This diversity and integration has regenerated the natural resources on the ranch without use of synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, or fungicides. The Browns are also part owners of a state-inspected abattoir, which allows them to direct market their products. They believe that healthy soil leads to clean air, clean water, healthy plants, animals, and people. Over 2,000 people visit the Browns Ranch annually to see this unique operation. They've had visitors from all 50 states and 27 foreign countries. I believe Gabe has spoken in, if not all 50 states, very, very close. Gabe and Brown's Ranch have received many forms of recognition for their work, including a Growing Green Award from the National Resource Defense Council, an Environmental Stewardship Award from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and a Zero Till Producer of the Year Award, to name a few. Gabe has also been named one of the 25 most influential ag leaders in the US. His recent book, Dirt to Soil, One Family's Journey into Regenerative Agriculture, is out on the presses just recently. He is a partner along with Ray Archuleta, Shane New, and Dr. Alan Williams in Understanding Ag, LLC. He's an instructor for the Soil Health Academy, which focuses on teaching others the power and importance of healthy, functioning ecosystems. And he hates long descriptions of his personal accomplishments. So if you could see him well, he'd be turning red with either anger or embarrassment. So that's a short introduction to our acclaimed speakers. And first up is Ann Fischer. And so Ann, I'm going to pass the baton to you. And thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate you asking. It's fun. I've been able to spend a couple moments down in Wyoming with some people down there. So I enjoy the country, enjoy the people, and I will hope I can share something with you that you can take home with you. So I'll bring up my screen. As John said, I work for NRCS in Baker, Montana, which is about 40 miles from where my husband and I ranch. And I say that rather loosely. I'm here and I go out and give advice and he does all the work. So, but primarily my work is in Baker, and for 25 years now, I've been working with farmers and ranchers on trying to really make them more profitable. And what I finally landed on was we had to be more productive. We had to reduce our inputs, and that was really probably the best way we could be more productive and more profitable. So in 20 minutes, I'm not going to, give you a magic wand of how to be profitable on your ranch, but I'm going to give you a little bit of insight on where we went and some key things that we've done to get there. So I want to start with a piece of soil, of course, and this is up in Wawota, Canada. A good friend who has passed away, but Neil Dennis did a fabulous job. He, 14-inch precip up there, so not over the top, but look at that organic matter layer up there. That was just incredible. So that's at probably generally 1 million pounds per acre. That's not something everybody's going to do everywhere, but it just shows you what is possible. And I've always regretted, I've been up there a couple times and I've never had great pictures of the neighbors, because I will guarantee you that's not what the rest of the country looked like. His production was phenomenal. So going up there was actually a Mother's Day present for me one year, because I had to see it for myself. I'd met Neil. He was very enthusiastic, wrote down what he did on a cocktail napkin, and then was whisked out the door. So making the trip up there just really opened up a whole realm of possibilities to me, and really described what we could at least strive for. Having looked at that previous slide with the organic matter, we get to this slide, and this was 10 years ago, and it's a slide I like to use because it was June 4th, which is generally speaking kind of cooler, and down here you can see in my pickup, the ambient air temperature was 66 degrees, so it was fairly cool. Yet this piece of bare ground is over 100 degrees. And this one over here, which has cover on it, so I think it's probably 10 inches apart from each other. It's 78 degrees or just tipping to 80. So 22 to 24 degrees difference at 66 degrees. Look at how much moisture this is going to lose compared to this one. And look at how much moisture this will keep there once it's in there, instead of running off the top or blowing off. So those pictures combined with the picture I showed you previously just mean the world. So how do you get there? Because I know we live in some pretty droughty areas. So I get the question a lot, but how do I get there? I don't have anything growing. How can I cover this soil when I don't have anything growing? And in recovery versus rest is a huge deal. And this picture is an old picture, NRCS picture that I've looked at since the beginning of my career. And the more I work in it, the more it means to me. Just look at the root structure. When you get over to the right, or even to this one, I think about weed issues, because I think we all have some sort of weed issues. And you think, wow, how is that going to outcompete some deep tap-rooted weed, perennial weed that we'll have forever? So it's taking care of a lot of different things when we can have real recovery and let that root system grow and be able to produce what we need it to produce. The other thing that I'm not going to get into, Gabe may get into, what else those roots are doing for you and why it's productive that way. Lots of biology connected to those roots, and a lot of food being given off by those roots. So again, Neil Dennis, obviously he has impacted my life and my career. So some necessary tools to get there. Electric fence or fence for sure, that really gives us the opportunity to move and do some different things where we need to. That's maybe not always a possibility. I work with some people that have big pastures, and it's either not a possibility in their own head, because that's not a place they want to go, and that's fine. Or the pastures are sections and there's just no way to start cross fencing that. So this is another opportunity that's becoming available, and that's putting collars on cows and be able to direct them where you want them. There's a video out on that if anybody's interested, I can send to you. And then the other one is always water, right? Water is always our limiting factor, or most always our limiting factor. So we'll talk a little bit about some different options there. First, here's another way to move those cattle. And this is a couple I work with in the western part of our county. And so that's more down around the 10-inch precip zone. And they're leasing this particular ground, and they've been trying to move into some regenerative ag, and they're trying to figure out how they can make it work. And they can't electric fence, or they can't fence it. So they actually looked at a video by Bob Kinford on placing cattle and tried it out last year and said it worked pretty well. They would move them, they would place them. So it takes some cowboying, takes some riding and monitoring, but you should be monitoring anyway. But I think it's definitely a way to go if that's what's in your goal system. So back to water. So this slide is representative of several things. So all of us get into a rut, whether you're planting trees and you find a set of trees that work really well, or you're doing something else. You just kind of get into a rut of that's what I'm going to run yearlings. Everybody should run yearlings, some sort of rut. And I find that in my line of work with water tanks. So every once in a while, I'll be visiting with some colleagues on the western part of the state or different part of the state. And this one came across my desk. And I thought, wow, that's kind of cool. That's a great idea. This is over by Dillon, Montana. And so I send it out to some of my friends and mentors, and I got some, oh, that's great. That's cool. You know, where is it? How'd they do it? And then I got the last one, and that's from your next speaker, Gabe Brown. And, you know, gotta love Gabe because he's always very honest. And he said, what in the world are you doing, Ann? Why would you build such a monstrosity? And I said, all right, this calls for a phone call. So I visited with him. I said, well, what would you do? What, you know, if you had your ideal situation, what would you do? And he said, I'd make it very temporary. He said, we have to get away from boxing ourselves in with permanent structures. And I'm not saying that, I mean, this certainly, this slide in particular could be used to work from, I'll say. So I work with a couple ranchers in the county, and very innovative, and he had just gone down to holistic management down in Wright, Wyoming. Came back, his head was spinning, and his issue was, okay, if I do this, if I bunch my herds together, how do I water them? How do I get enough water to them? And if I want to move like I want to move, how do I get that water? So he designed this portable system. So he has the tank that's about 3,000 gallons, and then you have a drinking tank in front. And he's actually, you can see the manifold, he's got them all together so he can move them around as needed, and he can have them all filling up, and they can drink as long as well is keeping up. He can do that wherever he can get enough hose. He was using, I think, just garden hose on this particular picture, but he has purchased some black plastic hose that he can put on top of the ground and move it wherever he needs to from a hydrant. He has upgraded, so he's moving forward, and he went to an aluminum tank. It's a little bit lighter. He can move these with his bale bed, obviously when they're empty. He's got a system that's pretty quick flow into the tank so that it can get there as fast as it can be pumped out by the well. So that's been really successful for him and for neighbors as we start grazing cover crops in fields that typically don't have water. We can move water in there, and I think one of the first pictures I showed you had one of them in there. And he also is using them in the winter. So he grazes, he's been trying to graze 12 months out of the year. And again, water can be an issue. You know, if you have the amount of snow they had here, they could certainly be eating snow, but he's been using these tanks. He doesn't fill them all the way full, and he has a reducer on them, but he's been using them in the winter. So great innovations. Some other options are these tanks out of Hermosa, South Dakota. We call them chicken waterers because they look like a big chicken waterer. Same concept, easy to move. You can pick them up with a tractor. They come in different sizes. Hook them up to a hydrant. If you need to hook them up to a hose, you could do that. So the drinking area is just right around the tank there. And theoretically, it's such a small area. Oops, sorry. Such a small area that you wouldn't get a calf stuck in there, but that we have found is not true. This is the owner of that, and he has found a calf stuck in there, but all plans have issues. I think he's made some adjustments to fix that. A couple others. So, you know, you don't have to be pretty. This works. This is just on skids. He can move that tank wherever he needs it. And here's Neil again. Neil was ever the inventor, and it doesn't, as I said, have to be very pretty. He's got I can't remember what the jug was that he used as a float. I think he's from Canada, so he uses a hockey puck for a stopper. He was pretty creative. So just any kind of system that gets you where you want to go. Quick couplers, these actually may be pictures that I stole from Gabe. And that was kind of what he was getting at. If you can get your pipeline out places, you know, at least close enough to where you might need to be, you can hook up about anything. So just some ideas. Penny had wanted me to kind of go through some of those opportunities. And I wanted to show you this video. This is at the place where the guy who makes the tanks, and we've started working on some pasture renovations. And by that, I mean, we want to do it with livestock. So we're not at 1 million pounds per acre. This particular video is at 250,000 pounds per acre. But like anything, it's a change and it's a little bit scary. So we started at 250,000. So there happened to be a film crew out this day, and it was the first, I think it was the first day he was doing this. And the guy had this drone, and you'll see in a minute, these cattle aren't really that excited about that drone. But I want to point out a couple things in the video. So he's got one of his tanks down here, and we're marching across. He's moving these cows every hour for 12 hours a day. So that proved to be rather daunting. And there they go. I thought these cows were going to run through that fence. I thought, this is it. We're going to train them to run through a fence. It's going to be a wreck. But they are very well trained to that electric fence, and they stopped right short of where it is. But there's a couple more of his tanks. So he's able to have that tank filling, and or this tank filling while this one's being utilized. That one on the end is also going to be full. So just different ways to utilize, excuse me, utilize that. So we got some nice hoof action that day anyway. And this, what you just saw there is, I just want to point out, is bigger than a half an acre, obviously. So we start at the tank, we graze a half hour, drop the, or an hour, drop the fence, they move to the next one. And really the idea is to get manure and urine on as much of that ground as we possibly can. Oftentimes we think we blame moisture for everything. We don't have enough moisture, it's not working, we don't have enough moisture. But what I see often is fertility. We don't have the fertility. We either don't have the carbon on top of the ground, and or we don't have the manure and urine to help fertilize that. So that's one of the goals we're after, is to try to increase productivity on that pasture by adding fertility. So it's great to have these plans and ideas and hearing other people do things, but inevitably something's going to go wrong. This is a picture that a person I work with recently shared with me. They had come to me, they wanted to do a twice over grazing system with their horses using electric fence. And, you know, I just gave them some ideas of how to do it. I wasn't pushing it by any means, but I talked to them a month ago, and they said, yeah, I think I'm going to bag it, because they had a hailstorm. And you can see all those bumps on that horse they had some big golf ball size hail. And then this horse didn't have any way to get back to the home. So it ran through two electric fences. And that's what she got to deal with. So I understand the frustration and the giving up. And I use these particular pictures because they're more graphic. But it happens to everybody so often, is you'll move in a direction, and anytime you make a change and move in a direction and something, you hit a barrier, the tendency is just to go back to what you were doing, whether it was working or not. And I can give you examples on our own place that something will happen. My husband will say, well, we're just going to go do this. And where did that come from? But years and years and years of doing the same thing, it's very comfortable to go back to that. And it's what you know, even though it may not be working, it's what you know. So in this particular example, I wanted to point out that the event, so the hailstorm and the response to that is going to equal the outcome. So if your response is to say, you know, we're just not going to do it, we're going to go back to just grazing the pasture, and turning them out and calling it good. That's your outcome. And that's fine if that's what your outcome, the desired outcome you have. But if you're looking for a different outcome, if you're looking at being more productive, then you have to maybe take that response and say, okay, this is what went wrong. We didn't give an avenue to those horses to get to shelter when something happens. It could be a wolf, or it could be a storm. It could be many things. So maybe just tweaking that. But I understand it's hard, moving outside the box. Every time you change something, even if you have changed things in the past, it's hard to do that next one because there are bad things that can happen. And by the way, everybody's watching you, right? Everybody's watching you. And there are those that are waiting for you to fail. Oftentimes those are the neighbors. And sometimes they'll wait 20, 30 years for you to fail, but they're waiting for you to fail. So you're under pressure from that. I talked to somebody the other day and they said, and this particular person is just outstanding at doing what he does. And he said, I just don't have any friends that I can talk to about what I do anymore. They don't understand. And he's a farmer. He said, honestly, all my friends now are ranchers that are going into regenerative ag because at least they understand the concepts. And I just wouldn't have expected him to feel that alone. But it's out everywhere. It's really everywhere. And if it's not the neighbors, it's the coffee shop, and it's I'm always amazed at what people will tell about other people. And I hear a lot of it in my profession. They'll come in the office and they share a lot of things that I know aren't true about the neighbor or somebody they see, but they lost this much money because they changed, and that's a lot of it. So that leads me into kind of the second part, and that's a colleague of mine and I sat down and talked about these regenerative ranchers that we are each working with. She's up in Jordan and Circle, Montana, and she's got some great producers up there doing some things, but they're kind of faced with the same thing. They're doing some things, everyone else thinks they're crazy. She's really frustrated because she wants to move forward with these people, but there are people that don't want, say, speakers to come in and be able to talk to the group as a whole, because I think it could move forward. So we put together a list of people we knew in our counties or near our counties that we worked with and asked them if they'd be interested in getting together. So we set a place in Miles City. We rented a place and got some food catered in for lunch. And I think Sue got a grant or got the local bank to sponsor it. And we had everybody, I think this was our first meeting. We had everybody kind of go around the room and talk about why they were there, what they wanted out of it. And I was surprised everybody was very willing to do so. Not always a very comfortable thing to do, but we have, these are all the guys that are regenerative, guys and gals, I shouldn't say just guys, but so they were willing to do it, and they were excited to be able to meet some people, other people that were facing some of the things they were doing and talking about. So we met a couple times last year, and we went to a potluck situation. We met at some various venues. We set a tour. So one of the things, I don't know if I have it on this slide. One of the things we set out was there won't be any, oh, we can't do that here. You can't say that at these meetings, as we can't do it here. So we always have questions that kind of start out like, what's, I'm trying to think what the last one was. What's the hardest thing you've encountered about moving your calving date? Or I think it started out as, what is your calving date? And then we went into what's the hardest thing. So we'd start out as a big group and write some things, and we moved into some smaller groups like this picture. And I just realized through this whole presentation, I have not been in presentation mode. I'm sorry. Well, you're seeing it. So so we've had challenge questions like that, and that gets the group thinking and talking, and really it's the group, what they want. It's not, you know, what Ann and Sue want. So we try to leave it to them as far as what direction they want to go. We had Gabe and Sarah Keogh speak, is that last month? I don't know, we're almost at May, so maybe it was 2 months ago, on a webinar. It was wonderful. We invited, you know, people outside the group, and I think we had, I don't know, 80 to 100 people. It was, and of course, they both do an excellent job, as you'll find out if you haven't heard Gabe speak before. So it's been, I've been surprised at how engaged everybody is. We just met 2 weeks ago or last week, and it's April. I mean, I couldn't get a board member to a board meeting in April to save my life. And these guys met, I think we had 20, 25 people show up. So they're very engaged, very interested in moving forward, and they get to, you know, we try to split them up at tables so they're not with their spouse or they're not with the neighbor, and they get to hear and discuss with other people. And oftentimes we'll have the challenge questions, but the questions and the discussion go in many different directions. So it's been hugely successful, and they want to keep going, and I don't know where it's going to go each time. I think that's all I have for you. I'm welcome to take questions at any time. I love this quote from Walt Davis: promote those things and conditions that you want rather than killing what you don't want. We get kind of caught up in the easy button of, you know, let's spray this or just kill that, and we don't think about why it's there. That's something else that we talk about in the group is, you know, why is it happening? We try to drill down to the why, which can be, again, uncomfortable, but that's why we're there. So John, that's all I have.
Thank you, Ann. We'll take questions. Again, you can write questions on the chat feature at the bottom of your page, and we'll get to those as we can. And at the end of the next presentation, we'll have some question answer time as well. But if we can clear that screen, we'll bring up Mr. Brown, and Gabe, I will hand it over to you.
All right, thank you, John. I will start sharing. I pull up my PowerPoint.
It's fun to look at the list of folks who are attending. There's some friends, there's some coyotes out there, some people I recognize.
All right, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And John, you are correct. You were the first person to bring me to Wyoming to speak. Been there a number of times since then and have a number of clients in Wyoming, so I get there fairly often, but very appreciative of you for bringing me there the first time. Also, always a pleasure to visit with Ann. I always get a chuckle out of her. And yes, John, you are correct. She's one of the most enthusiastic people you'll ever meet. So I thought what I'd do just briefly this evening is talk to you a bit about keys to increasing profitability, ways that I've done it on my ranch, ways that some of my clients have increased their profitability, and realize it's all up to you. I'm not telling you to do these things. That's entirely up to you. People often ask me what it is that makes Brown's Ranch different. And I tell people, Gabe Brown really isn't very intelligent. I'm just awfully good at observing what other people are doing, and then I steal their ideas. And I implement those that I think will work on our ranch. And that's one of the keys to increasing profitability. So I often get asked by people, where do you start? Where do you start going down the regenerative path? And the number one thing I think is you need to change the way you see things. So often as ranchers, we focus on grass. I really think we need to focus on the soil, because all life comes from the soil. And that John said it in the introduction, how he has a master's in soil, but oftentimes soil health is overlooked and how soil ecosystems function. If we can move soil health in a positive direction, we're going to move our pocketbook in a positive direction. The picture you see before you is my soil. This picture was taken 2 years ago on the left, and my neighbor's just across the fence on the right. And Ann can testify to this because she's been to my ranch a number of times. When my wife and I purchased the ranch in 1991, I can honestly say our soils were considerably worse than that on the right. But by using these practices, we were able to regenerate our soils. However, I want to make it perfectly clear, the soils on my ranch are still degraded. They are in no way, shape, or form where they should be, but we're moving in a positive direction.
Hey, Gabe, just a second. Is it, Penny, can you help us get the screen? I don't think we, I don't have Gabe's
Really?
PowerPoint. I
Really?
can see Gabe, which is always a pleasure.
All right. Let me escape here once.
Gabe, I think you
Yeah.
need to just share your screen.
Yeah, and I've done that.
Oh, okay. It's not,
Did Ann stop sharing?
she did.
Okay. All right.
No,
You thought I was trying to hijack you, didn't
Yeah, I did.
you?
Now you're getting close.
Okay. We at that one? Can
There
you
we
see
go.
that?
And yes, I think you're up and running.
Okay, I apologize for that. So, as I was saying, the soils on the left are my soils as of 2 years ago. The soils on the right are my neighbors. And when we purchased the ranch in 1991, our soils were not as good as those on the right. So we've come a long way, but as I said, we're still degraded. And I tell people I have the good fortune in that I'm on literally hundreds of farms and ranches all over North America every year. And I have never, ever been on a single one, including my own, that's not degraded. So there's nothing to feel bad about. It's just where we're at. But the good news is we can regenerate soils, and we can regenerate soils anywhere. This is just a close-up. That's my soil on the shovel. And that pad there in the foreground is my neighbor's soil. Point number 2 I want to make for increasing profitability is, as Ann stated, the power of stock density. And like Ann, I learned much of what I know about stock density from Neil Dennis. I went up there in 2006 for the first time. I was practicing before then rotational grazing, trying to follow Ellen Savory's holistic principles. But when I saw what Neil was doing with the stock density and saw his soils, I knew that I needed to implement more of that on our ranch. Andre Voisin said it best when he said, overgrazing has little to do with the number of animals, but rather has more to do with the amount of time plants were exposed to the animals. If animals remain in any one place too long or return to it too soon, they overgraze certain plants. And I see this over and over as I travel about. In the same pasture, you'll have overgrazing and you'll also have overrest. We need to get away from that. Great example is if you have one cow grazing a 10-acre paddock all season, that cow can kill literally thousands of plants. It's overgrazing, but understocking. But 1,000 cows grazing the same 10-acre paddock for one day will not kill a single plant. This is what we have to focus on. This is a pretty interesting picture here. I'll tell you a little story about it. So my ranch is on the right and neighbors on the left. When I came to this ranch in 1983, the neighbor was running over 500 cow-calf pairs. My father-in-law was running 65 pair and 20 yearlings. Now you fast forward 30 plus years later, that same neighbor is running 50 cow-calf pairs, and we're running over 800 head. The pasture on the right has been grazed. It's recovered to that point. See, they're set stocking. They dump them out in early April, pick them up about Thanksgiving time every year. And you can play golf on it every year. Which trajectory do you want to be on? It's all about management. So my son took these photos. This is actually a wildlife management area that the state of North Dakota asked if we would graze livestock on for them. And I want to show the impact, the power of animal impact. So this is located a ways from our ranch. So we're only going down there to do one move a day. So Paul put 119 heifers on 1 acre for 1 day. Now that's not very high stock density, but considering that before it was extremely low stock density and set stock, it's quite a change. So here's on August 1st, that's immediately the day after we took them out of there. We set that reel in that washout just to as a focal point here. So that's the day after they came out. Okay, here's 1 month later, you start to see it green up. Obviously we had a little moisture that year because there's some regrowth there. Here is a year later. Now that washout is still there. You don't want to hit it with the side by side, but look at the diversity starting to come in and look at the biomass growth there. Okay, and here's 3 years later. There's that reel, that arrow's pointing to the reel. Look at the diversity we have and look at the biomass production. Now this was grazed in 2011, then it was grazed in 2013. We're grazing every 2 years on this particular tract, but that shows just the power. So my point is we need to use high enough stock density to get the proper bite on the plants, along with good trample and dung and urine distribution. And we need to be grazing for a short duration. Here's why that's so important. I think we underestimate the power of manure and urine and that trampling. If you were to be continuous graze a pasture, it'd take you 27 years to get 1 manure pat per square yard. But if you graze a paddock for 1 day at high enough stock density, you can get 1 manure pat per square yard from that one grazing, from that 1 day. Now it takes some stock density, but you can do it. And here's why that manure is so important. This is from an average size mature cow. You're going to get about 1/4 pound of nitrogen, 0.15 pounds of phosphorus, and 1/2 pound of potassium. Now you multiply that times 100 or times 1,000. That's a tremendous amount of nutrients that are being cycled back onto that landscape. Look at 100 cows. All of a sudden you've added 23, 15, 50 on that particular pasture. That's going to stimulate plant growth. And then realize that the biology in the soil is closely related to the biology in the rumen of a ruminant. So there's this exchange of biology also, which really comes into play. Here's a photo that absolutely amazes me. People wonder, okay, Ann mentioned moving livestock every hour. Well, what this photo shows, this is simply the difference in 1 year time between moving livestock twice a day or moving them once every 2 days. Once every 2 days on the right, twice a day on the left. Look at the difference in those soils just from that little bit of change. And I know people often say, well, I don't have time to do that. How can you look at this photo and how can you not have the time to do that, right? What's going to give you a greater return than that? You know, this webinar tonight is all about increasing profit. Which of those soils is going to increase your bottom line to the greatest extent? Obviously, the soils on the left. Scale and context are relevant. As Ann said, I am not saying that you have to move cattle 4 or 5 times a day, but most of us need to move them more often than we are. What I always ask clients starting out is, how often do you check your livestock? Well, I check them once a week. Well, then you certainly better be willing to move them once a week. Okay. And then what type of terrain and context do you have will determine as to the approach you take. On an easy terrain like this, it's very easy to run polywire and move them pretty frequently. This is one of my clients in Montana that I'm working on. That's not very easy terrain there. In that terrain, we're using cowboys to push the cattle up those draws. And we're going to a different draw every few days and then moving them back out of there and up the next one. You know, it's pretty easy to be able to hire a cowboy who wants to sit on a horse. Well, let them sit on their horse, put them to work regenerating your soils. And it's absolutely amazing the change. Now, I do have to say, when you get into terrain like this, obviously you're going to need longer recovery times. And I'll talk about that coming up. No excuses. This is down in the Chihuahuan Desert of Mexico. You talk about some rough terrain and talk about some ingenuity. Look what they're using to hold their poly reels there. And that's pretty much solid rock. And if they can do it there, they're doing daily moves down there in that terrain. And it's absolutely amazing the results they're seeing. Third point, keep the soil covered. This is an interesting photo. This is actually on a cropland field where swath grazing was used. And where that shovel is, and that's all the further we could get that spade in the ground, that's one of the issues with swath grazing. You're removing the armor, the cover from that soil, and putting it only in the windrow. Now, if you move over a few feet under the windrow, look how far we can get the shovel in the ground. That armor is just critical. And I think this is one of the most overlooked things on a ranch is we don't realize the importance of that armor protecting that soil. Ann talked about it and I'll reiterate it. It is just critical. Look at here, you don't see any bare soil. There's armor on that soil. In one of the first slides Ann had, she showed that litter, that organic material on Neil Dennis's land. That's what we're trying to do is lay down that organic material so that it can protect the soil and then be used by biology. Ann talked about soil temps and the importance of it. What are we really doing as farmers and ranchers? Our goal is to take sunlight and grow plants, whether it be forage for livestock or cash crops. Most crops prefer a soil temperature of about 70 degrees. If soil temp 70 degrees, 100% of the moisture can be used for growth. As soil temp starts to rise, that plant shuts down. Well, what are we doing to our potential for income? If we don't have armor on the surface keeping that soil temperature down, we're not going to be making near as much money. You know, so often people blame it on the weather, blame it on drought. No, we need to look in the mirror. Most of the times where we're seeing poor production, we need to look in the mirror. It's man-made. You know, and as Ann said, soil temps can increase significantly. I was in northern Alberta here last year, a year ago, on an 80-degree temperature day. We were recording soil temps over 125 degrees on bare soil. Those plants are all shut down and you're negatively affecting biology. That's one surefire way to not make money. Fourth, we need adequate recovery time. It amazes me how few ranchers give adequate recovery time. One of my idols, although I'll probably never admit it to him, is Ray Bannister there near Webo, Montana. And I'll never forget the first time I went to raise and he was talking about his 22 months of recovery time. I can definitely see the reason for that. On our ranch here near Bismarck, we're at a 12 to 15 month recovery time. Yet you hear these people talk about twice over systems. That's a losing proposition in most environments. Now you got to put your context and your environment into the equation. But in ours, I need at least 12 to 15 months to get full recovery. This is my friend Alejandro Carrillo. This is the Chihuahuan Desert of Mexico. And we went to visit Alejandro's ranch. We drove through literally hundreds of miles of desert like this. Takes 300 acres to run a cow. See those hills in the background? They're going to come into play here, so keep it in mind. It was pretty depressing just driving mile after mile of bare desert with hardly a plant growing on it. Then Alejandro had us walk to this. This is a washout area, gully, severe erosion that came from 6 to 8 inches of rainfall flowing off those hills. And that's the erosion that was caused. Now, we sent Juan Pablo down to the bottom there. Notice what's right above his head? That's a barbed wire fence. Alejandro told us this erosion took place in the last 60 years. Now, notice in the upper left-hand corner of this picture, what do you see? I'm going to zoom in there. That's 48 inches, over 4 feet of carbon. I'll go back here. You see, what that tells us is this was once a vast grassland. The Chihuahuan Desert of Mexico was once a vast grassland, and that carbon there proves that. It's mankind that caused the desertification due to improper grazing, due to leaving the animals set stocked on there. That's an absolutely amazing photo and shows you what's happening all around the world. Now we cross those hills in the background are the same ones, and we cross onto Alejandro's ranch. This is Alejandro's father. We literally went from that desert there through a gate onto this. The difference is management. It has nothing to do with rainfall. As a matter of fact, I'll never forget, we had Alejandro do a webinar for us. And one of the questions was about moisture. How much moisture do you get? And Alejandro said, well, we get 6 to 8 inches, but I really don't need that much. And I thought, wow, does that tell a story? He can grow forage like that on less than 6 inches of rainfall. Just another photo. That's the same hills in the background there. It's strictly management. So how did Alejandro regreen that desert? The answer is here. See that manure pat? I told you the biology in the rumen, including fungi, is closely related to the biology in the soil. A rumen is fungal dominant. Perennial plants need the fungal component in order to germinate and then thrive. Alejandro used livestock as a tool, the fungal component in the rumen, to regreen the desert. And there's many people down there that are doing this. There's no excuses, people. We can do this all over. Yet I travel extensively. I spent a lot of time in my Montana, Wyoming, New Mexico, Arizona, West Texas. I see the desertification that's taking place. There's absolutely no excuse for it. We can change that. Fifth key is diversity. Walk into a healthy native ecosystem. What do you see? You see a tremendous amount of diversity. This is one of our native paddocks here. Count the species. My son's documented over 140 different species, grasses, forbs, legumes. That's what we need in our ecosystems. There's over 200,000 known species of plants. How many do you have on your ranch? Chances are the latent seed bank is still there. It just needs the opportunity to germinate and then the recovery period for it to grow. This is some work by Dr. Tillman, University of Minnesota. Plant biomass on the left, species diversity on the bottom. Notice what happens. Yet what are we doing in agriculture today? How many of us have monoculture alfalfa fields, monoculture hay fields? Why do we do that? It makes absolutely no sense. We need diversity. Plant biomass on the left, functional diversity on the bottom. By functional diversity, we mean grasses, forbs, legumes, trees, shrubs. Do we have functional diversity in our pastures? So often people look at forbs and they think of them as weeds. Forbs are critical for a healthy ecosystem and critical for nutrients for our livestock. This is giant ragweed, a common weed that thrives in high soils that are high in nitrate. And oftentimes we see those around corrals or in areas where we may have spread a lot of manure, something like that. I challenged you early on to change the way you see things. Here's one of our customers, clients in Minnesota. This is what Cliff does with his giant ragweed. Do you know how many pounds of beef he's going to be able to get per acre there off of that? Yet many people would have went out and dished that down or sprayed it and killed it with a herbicide. Cliff was intelligent enough to realize that's a lot of feed that I can utilize there. Here's just a still photo of that. He mob grazed them through that. They did very well on that. This is a picture from Dr. Williams down in Mississippi. A lot of people would say, oh, you can't get cattle to eat weeds. Oh, we got to train them to eat weeds. No, we don't. We just need to increase stock densities, and those animals will select. We haven't found anything on our ranch as far as a growing plant that our livestock will not eat. They will consume everything to some degree. This is from my place. I just turned these grass finishers out onto a new paddock, and there was this Russian olive tree growing there. They immediately walked over to that and started grazing the leaves off it. There it is 15 minutes later. And some people might look at that and think, oh boy, you need to feed your cattle better. No, there was some nutrient that Russian olive tree was cycling that those cattle wanted. I think it's a good thing, and it shows the importance of diversity. Look at this. Is this an invasive species? Seeing prickly pear there. Is that an invasive species? Depends how you look at it. Alejandro's cattle will readily graze prickly pear. He's got a video, and I wish I could have got it embedded on here, that shows his cows biting that off. Then they will rake it on the ground to knock the thorns off it, and then they will consume it. That's how you regreen the desert. That's how you use livestock as a tool. This is required reading. Fred Prevenz's book, Nourishment. What animals can teach us about our nutritional wisdom. This is excellent reading. One of the things that's missing today, I believe, is we're not getting the nutrients cycled through our soil, and we do not have the diversity in the diet for our animals and also our own diets. Read that book if you have the opportunity. Sixth point I will give you is to stockpile forage. I think this is a real missed opportunity on most ranches. Most all ranches we work with are overstocked. They run way too many cows. Because of that, they have to put up hay. They spend a lot of money either putting up hay or buying hay. Why not stockpile forage? What we do on our ranch is we defer several pastures every year that will not be grazed, and then we'll be able to go in there early in the spring, graze those paddocks much earlier, lay down a tremendous amount of biomass, thus helping the biology in the soil. That's what that paddock looked like once we were done grazing it. Our cows then put on a tremendous amount of weight in April. We're weaning in early April. They put on weight, start calving in the middle of May. Life is good. Seventh, take advantage of epigenetics. I think this is an underappreciated asset that ranchers have. We need to take advantage of that. We need to run livestock that work on our own farm and ranch. So often we get it beat into our heads that we got to produce more pounds, more pounds, more pounds. Gabe Brown is all about more profit, more profit, more profit per acre. I could care less that I don't have the heaviest cattle. What you're looking at right there is actually a bred heifer that weighs less than 700 pounds. She lived on dry forage, mature forage, the majority of her life. She bred on it. She'll raise the calf and be in the herd for a long time because she can make use of the forages on my ranch. Ann mentioned this, but there's really no reason to provide winter water for livestock in the winter if you have snow available. Now, I'm not saying, yes, you do have to have a backup plan, but cattle do just fine on snow. Our cows have calves hanging on them and they live on snow in the winter. You know, it's a way that we can get livestock onto areas of our landscape that doesn't have a source of water. Snow is a source of water. Nobody's out there breaking ice for the deer or the buffalo. Why do we got to break ice and provide water for the cattle in the winter? One of the things to take advantage of epigenetics, run those calves on the cows for a longer time period. Those cows are teaching those calves how to balance their diet, what to graze, what not to graze. They can teach them that there's a storm coming, they better seek out protection. Don't provide your livestock with a bed and breakfast. That's a surefire way to realize that you have a hobby and not a business. You know, if we're providing our livestock with a lot of processed forage, we really don't have much of a business. We've got a hobby. Allow your livestock to do what they do best. I always tell our clients, if you think the cattle need to be in a corral, go open the gate once and see where they want to go. They have 4 legs for a reason. Let them use them. So briefly, just quickly, here's our production cycle. We calve in sync with nature, start May 15th, done the end of June. We let the calves, leave the calves on the dams, usually until about the 1st of April. All of our heifers are exposed to bulls for 30 days. They're ultrasounded 45 days later. Cows are not tested because what am I going to do if I ultrasound a cow in December? Wean her calf and then have a few calves stand in the corral? No. We just let the calf nurse her the rest of the winter, wean those calves in early April. What happens to an open cow come green up time? They blow up and look like Gabe Brown, right? Well, when's your hot hamburger market? What we do is we go out the last week of calving, the end of June. We set up panels in whatever pasture they're in. Any cow that doesn't have a calf on her means she either lost her calf at calving or she was open. That's your hot hamburger market, 4th of July. Sell them that. Saves all the headache, all the, you know, what a waste of time running cows through a chute and doing all this stuff. It just makes no sense. People just, I don't know. I come to the conclusion a lot of ranchers must be making a lot of money because they sure look for ways to spend it foolishly. Bulls are selected from our own herd. What animals are most adapted to our environment, but animals that are raised in our environment? This stuff about inbreeding and all that is hogwash. You just don't see it, you know. What happens to deer and bison and everything else? Look at the cattle herds that were out on the islands there, up on the Aleutian Islands, you know. See a bunch of inbreeding there, yet 100+ years they ran, you know. You got to get away from that. Now I'm going to create some controversy here, but I've been known to do that from time to time. If more than 50% of your yearling heifers become pregnant in a 30-day breeding season, you are feeding them too good. You will advance fertility and the ability for those animals to thrive in your environment very slowly. My point being, I think we overfeed. How are you going to select which ones can thrive in your condition if you don't put pressure on them? So think about it. I'd like to have the conversation about that with you. Why prop up the bottom end? Producers spend money that only serves the purpose of keeping the poorer animals in the herd. Why do we want to do that? Sell the bottom end and the expenses stop. Remove the crutches. Now, I want to make this perfectly clear. I'm not telling you to not vaccinate. That's your own decision. I'm simply sharing with you. We have not vaccinated an animal for anything in 12 years now. We have not used any wormers. We have not used any insecticides. We have not used supplements, including salt or mineral. If they can't survive in my environment, they belong in a McDonald's hamburger. Nah, my cattle are too good for McDonald's hamburgers. Sorry. Number 8, take advantage of natural processes. When we quit using the insecticides on our livestock, we really noticed that nature kicked in and filled the void. Here's tree swallows, cowbirds. Here's cowbirds, a lot of them following our herd. Here's in the winter. We even have cowbirds in the winter now staying with our herd. Dung beetles. Took 2 years for our first dung beetle to show up. Now we've got over 17 species documented on the ranch. Yellow dung flies, they're a predator. They're good. If you see those, that's a good thing. Hister beetles, rove beetles, these are all predator insects that are good. We just need to encourage them. If we use insecticides on our livestock, we're going to kill these beneficials also. Lady beetles, tremendous predators. Dragonflies, tremendous predators. Velvet mites, blister beetles. Yes, blister beetles are a predator. Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, entomologist, told me for every insect species that's a pest, there's 1,700 that are beneficial. How many flies are going to make it through that maze of orb weavers there? So this shows you what my son does in his spare time. He'd actually track the populations of these different predators and look at that. Notice how when one species, it was a low in their cycles, others were at a high. That's nature's way of balancing. And the fact of the matter is, they dry out that manure pat, there goes your fly problem. I want to show you this. Now, this was done a number of years ago, but this is on our 350 cow herd. We ran some numbers. Fly tags save $1,188 a year. Ivomec, between the calves and the cows, saved $2,400 a year. You add that up over 30 years of ranching career, there's $100,000 more you've got in your savings account. Why do we want to write checks when nature will do this for us? Fact of the matter is, your ranch is a direct reflection of you. If you don't like the way it is, you need to be the one to change that. You know, it's your management that dictates that. And I just encourage you to, as Ann said, step outside the box, change the way you see things, and make your ranch what you want it to be. With that, John, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Gabe. How unusual for you to be to get into dangerous topics. We've got a couple, so we are going to do some question and answering now. And there's a number of questions that came through the chat function. One of them right off the bat, and I may have a sense of anyway, relative to what you were talking about most recently. How long did you have to cull, and for how heavy did you have to cull, and for how long to get a herd of serious grazers?
Yep, and realize this is where this is why we added the sixth principle of context. We quit all these things cold turkey. We were just financially in a position where we could do that. And I'm not going to recommend to my clients to go do that, but literally within the first 2 years, we turned over 50% of the herd. And now, though, it's absolutely amazing. You know, a lot of people have issues with their wet twos rebreeding to calve as 3-year-olds. We just don't see that issue. Once a heifer gets bred on our ranch, chances are she's going to stay around a long time. We just hear Paul just hauled to the slaughter facility a couple 22-year-old cows that have been in the herd the whole time, producing every year. But yep.
Two more related ones. Talk about prairie dogs, and you've seen in Ventonata that kind of the new hybrid or new hyper invasives.
No, I'm not familiar with that one.
Oh, well, good.
Prairie dogs, of course, I'm familiar with. Many of our clients have them. And the thing about prairie dogs, what we found works the best is you have to encourage natural predation, and you absolutely have to allow greater recovery around those prairie dog towns so that those predators have the opportunity to hide and then start preying on those prairie dogs. It's not easy, especially if they're already at critical mass. Then you need to import the plague or something there.
Yeah, pray for plague. Ann, can a Northern Wyomingite join your Eastern Montana group?
Certainly. We have some, we've just inducted a irrigated producer from Forsyth area. So certainly it'd be, I was just trying to think of somebody that could relate to that. And yeah, we're definitely opening it up. We do some virtual things, but other than that, when we meet, we'll meet in, whoever can meet, we'll meet in Miles City generally, or we'll have tours. So send me an email and I'll put you on our email list.
And I know I for one can think of at least one organization that would bend over backwards to help a new group of ranchers, a peer group, begin.
Yeah, absolutely.
So whoever is listening, if that's of interest, do get in touch with Powder River Basin. They can get in touch with me, and that'd be something that is of great interest to helping peer groups begin. Lots of questions about the culling. You got people nervous. After a 50% cull, were you able to find purchase replacements?
No, because we keep all our heifers, so that we quickly, it never really affected cow numbers too much because we were keeping heifers back. And on those early years, I better clarify, we were not putting as much pressure on those heifers, so our conception rates were considerably higher than the 50%. But now, you know, on a 300 cow herd, if we have to replace 10 to 15 cows a year, that'd be about it. So we don't need that many bred heifers each year. But earlier on, we did have higher conceptions on the heifers because we were not pressuring them as hard. So that replaced those cows that got culled.
And this is okay. I'm going to ask you one more and then go back to Ann. How does one become a Gabe Brown client?
Yeah, so that has to do with our firm Understanding Ag. You can just Google understandingag.com.
All right. And I've got more of a conceptual one. How do you defend livestock with people who do argue that all cows are bad?
Oh, that is a conceptual one. You know, it's tricky, and I've run into it for several years. The first time I was hit with it, you know, it seemed like it turned on a dime, right? Cowboys were just very romantic for so long, and then all of a sudden we were the evil people. So education, depends who you're dealing with and what their beliefs are. But it's a tricky one. I think we're all responsible to do it, to show people what we can do and how we can do it. I think I have a daughter down in Colorado, down in Denver, she gets pretty fired up over it, and she wants to write a blog. She wants to write and encourage the stockmanship groups down there to be more proactive. You know, we give money to a lot of these groups, and I think now you got me on a roll. One of the biggest issues is we talk to ourselves, right? We'll have workshops and we'll have educational things, but it's always to us instead of the greater public. So the more we can do to encourage integration with the greater public who is so removed from their food source and understanding how things function. Elevator talks at every chance you get, and I do that, you know, just because I like to. But I think the worst thing we can do is kind of get into a standoff with those people, because a lot of them are looking for that, right? So I think we have to be careful about how we do it and be very educational, but at any chance we get, you know, start, and I see Penny's putting up Kiss the Ground movie is a great movie. Had a lot of comments from relatives and friends from across the United States that don't know anything about agriculture that watched it and thought it was fabulous. So I think that, and Gabe can talk to that a little bit more, but education.
John, if I may add a couple of things there. First of all, on the Kiss the Ground movie, the sequel will be called Common Ground, and filming will start next month on that. And it's going to be much, much better than Kiss the Ground even. But I'll tell you, you know, there's ways to, and it depends on the situation and who you are trying to just have a conversation with about beef and the role it plays. And we can get into the fact that methane is not as detrimental as people think, and that there was 50 to 75 million bison grazing in the northern plains, which is more than the beef animals we have in the US now. And why wasn't methane an issue back then? But depending on the crowd, here's one way I handle it is, there was once I had the opportunity to debate a vegetarian. And so we're having this debate, and as part of why I agreed to it, we each got to ask each other a question at the end. So my question to the vegetarian was, how many plant species did you eat that day? And their answer was about 12. And I said, well, gee, the steak that I ate, that beef animal ate for 100 different plants the last day of its life. I'm more of a vegetarian than you are. And how could they argue with that? You know, the place just erupted and laughed. But I made my point. You know, those phytonutrients that are in those plants transfer to the beef animal and then to our bodies. And that's really playing out with this COVID pandemic. Those who are unfortunately succumbing to it, many of them have a depressed immune system due to unhealthy gut microflora and microbiome, I should say. And so this is a perfect opportunity for us to educate that ruminants and other grazing animals should be and need to be an important part of the diet, not only for the health of the ecosystem, but for our health as well.
Yep. Two more things. One, very quickly back to your particular operation, Gabe. Do you let up on density? Do you decrease your herd density at all during calving?
Oh, yes, definitely. You know, my business partner, Dr. Alan Williams, usually shows a slide of variation in stock density. And he says, we do all of these things some of the time, we do none of them all the time. You have to pulse things and be varied in your approach. You're not going to graze same pasture the same time every year, and you're not going to use the same stock densities. Yes, during calving, We're calving out on pasture and it's a much lower stock density. And realize that we only use the ultra high stock density at certain times when we're trying to address a particular resource concern on a particular pasture.
Okay, I got a couple minutes, two more quick or two more deep ones. Ann, how do you get help to create a management plan for a degraded Forest Service lease?
Well, in general, NRCS should be able to help you with that, even though it's a forest lease. If you can get some help there, if not, Gabe's business, there's some private entities out there. There have been people who've changed their Forest Service lease by showing that they do good practices and good management on their private lease. It takes some time and it takes some perseverance, but I know some people who've done it. So
I would add, just from my experience down south, it takes a relationship with your Forest Service district manager or your range con for either the BLM or the Forest Service, whether we like it or not. This is a little contentious opinion, Gabe. I believe that grazing is a privilege, and the feds are the owners, and so we have to have the owners on board in order to change those plans. And their bureaucracy is thick. It can be done, but it takes a relationship with
so
that
the
range
video that I talked about with the cows with the collars, that was sent to me by U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So I think, as we work with those other entities and we gain some trust with them, they can certainly help us move some of the other government agencies forward in a direction.
They have flexibility.
And honestly, I just saw a presentation last week by a Forest Service lady.
Oh, it froze up.
First time I've seen Ann quiet.
Yeah, this is wonderful. Let's get a screenshot.
And I have to, so I think the more we can go that direction and start understanding the whole ecosystem, the better.
Okay, thank you.
What are you laughing at? Because I can't stop talking?
No, you did stop talking. You froze for a minute. Thank you, Gabe and Ann. Thanks very much. This has been an hour and a half of great fun and good learning. And you each have a chance for some closing remarks, a few minutes apiece. Gabe, would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you, John. And thank you, Penny, and those who invited me to be with you this evening. I can't emphasize enough that your ranch is a reflection of you, and it's up to you what you want to do. I was in no way this evening trying to tell you how you should or shouldn't run your ranch. That's up to you. But I am also here to tell you, we have not found a single place anywhere in the world where there is soil where we can't regenerate it and can't advance soil health and can't increase profitability. It can be done anywhere. And so don't get discouraged. And Ann is absolutely correct. It's not often I'd say that one, but Ann's absolutely correct in that you need to find support from your peers. And, the best thing you can do is to hang around like-minded people and learn from each other and support and help each other.
Ann?
Well, I'd like to start by saying that we are having a workshop in Baker. I'm going to do a little ad here. June 15th and 16th, and we'll be having Fred Provenza, who wrote the book Nourishment that Gabe talked about, and Dr. Alan Williams, who he also talked about, who's a partner of his. Not often that I would invite even one professor type person, much less two, but they're very on the ground and as fabulous a scientists as I know, quite honestly. So really excited about that. If you're interested, send me an email or give me a call. other than that, again, it's an opportunity to be around those like-minded people, because I think everybody and anybody who's coming is looking forward to that kind of discussion and meeting up with other people who are like-minded and want to move forward. And I think that's where you get some of those situations solved. I saw somebody had written Penny about a large ranch and some issues on how you do some things. And they are complicated, but they're never unsolvable. So I think if you can get a group of people together to start looking at some of those resources, the more the better. And so again, I thank everybody for having me. And it was fun talking to all of you. And Gabe, you do realize that when you told me that I was right, that's recorded.
For the record, let the record reflect.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you both very much.